Good evening. I'm Thuy Vu. Welcome to This Week in Northern California. With the presidential inauguration coming up on Monday and major developments this week on gun control and immigration reform, we focus tonight on politics from California to Washington, D.C. We'll hear from Governor Jerry Brown later in the program. And to help analyze it all, we're joined in studio by Carla Marinucci, San Francisco Chronicle senior political reporter, Debra Saunders, San Francisco Chronicle conservative columnist, and Scott Shafer, host of the California Report, joining us from Washington, D.C. Scott, let's start with you. You've been talking to our California lawmakers this week on the push for immigration reform. Is there progress on comprehensive reform, and what are you hearing from our congressional officials?
Well, Thuy, it seems like the stars are aligning for immigration reform, something significant to happen in this session. No legislation yet, of course, but there is a lot of conversations that are happening. I spoke this week with South Bay Democrat Zoe Lofgren. She's on a subcommittee that will be taking up this issue as part of the Judiciary Committee. And I asked her, you know, what's happening and how likely is it that we're going to get something done on immigration reform? Here's what she had to say.
There's got to be some way for the 11 million people who are here without their papers to somehow get right with the law. Right now, I mean, if you commit an offense other than immigration, you can, pay a penalty and move on with your life. Not so with immigration. Right now, for example, we have 2 million migrant farm workers about in the United States. 70 to 80% of them are here without their papers. We have 5,000 permanent residence visas for people without a college diploma. I mean, we've got husbands and wives that are separated for, half a decade. That's not acceptable. So we need to reform the system for the economy and for American families.
And what Lofgren told me is that this is a real imperative for Democrats. It has been. What's new, Thuy, is that it also is now an imperative for Republicans, because the election results from last November made very clear that the Republican Party needs a new message for Latino and Asian Americans and other immigrant groups if they have any chance of recapturing the White House.
Scott, this is Carla Marinucci. I mean, what's your thoughts on this? We've seen Paul Ryan, Marco Rubio extend a hand to President Obama, so to speak, and suggest they are ready to talk about immigration reform. But what's the biggest hurdle here?
Well, I think the biggest hurdle in the end is going to be politics, of course, but the issue of citizenship. What Marco Rubio outlined this week and last weekend is very close to what President Obama talked about in 2011. And so I think that'll provide some cover for other Republicans when you've got someone like Marco Rubio, a rising star in the party, Paul Ryan, saying we're ready to do a deal here. But the devil is in the details, as they always say. Democrats feel very emboldened on this issue, and they're going to sort of, swing for the fences. They want full legal status, including citizenship for undocumented immigrants, and it's not clear how far Republicans will go to do that.
But, Scott, it is clear that they're listening, because Senator Rubio had before only supported very small steps in the immigration reform debate, a series of small bills. He did not want a big sweeping bill, and now he's sort of changing his tune a little bit and saying, you know what, I might support that. But I wanted to drive this home for California as well. Carla, what role do you see California playing in this immigration debate?
Well, California is home to the largest number of undocumented immigrants, an estimated 3 million of them. This is a place where the DREAM Act is going to be a huge issue. We've already seen a lot of the organizing that has gone on the immigration issue. A lot of the political pressure for President Obama has come right out of California. California is going to play a role in this, absolutely. There's no question.
Scott, I have a question for you.
And I would add that if you look at I was going to say, if you could look at some of the congressional races in this past election, where you have Ami Bera, a first-generation Indian American, knocking off Dan Lundgren, and Raul Ruiz down in the Coachella Valley, knocking off Mary Bono Mack. So both of those elections sent a very strong signal about where California is on this issue.
Scott, do you think the first bill will come from the Senate or from the House? Who's going to act first?
Well, at this point, I think the House is being very cautious, and in some ways they're saying, why don't you go first and see what you can get through? And I think that they don't want to stick their necks out too far. But what's been happening in the House in the last week or two with the Sandy relief passing and also the deal to avoid the fiscal cliff, those things had more Democratic votes than Republicans. And there's a lot of sense that if that happens to John Boehner too many times, his speakership could be in trouble. So my guess is it'll come from the Senate. But you've got Zoe Lofgren meeting quietly with a Republican from Florida. They're talking about details that they could bring back to their colleagues. So I think actually this is one of those issues where people in both houses are going to want to take credit for being out front on this issue. So I think you're going to see a spate of bills coming forward.
And Scott, this is obviously a hot issue right now. Lots of legislators, as you mentioned, are jumping on the bandwagon. The lawmakers that you talk to in Washington, how hopeful are they that there will be a bipartisan deal reached this time around? This is not a new idea. Immigration reform has been attempted before, and it's failed.
I think there is a lot of hope. As I said, the stars kind of are aligning on this. Not only do you have Republicans willing to come to the table and talk seriously about a major reform of immigration law, you've also got traditionally Republican-leaning groups like agriculture. I talked to somebody from the Western Growers Association this week who's really pressuring Republicans on this. You've got religious groups. You've got the Chamber of Commerce and business interests in California and elsewhere who are really going to push the Republicans to come to the table and do something meaningful so that the legal status of these 11 million people in the United States will be clarified, and so they can get jobs, they can go to school, and get more integrated into society.
But I think one other point that could be made is the other big change is that the Democrats are doing something. When Barack Obama first ran for president in 2008, he promised his first year he would push a comprehensive immigration reform bill. He just didn't do it. This time, he got 71% of the Latino vote, and a lot of Latinos were saying, "Wait a minute, you promised, you didn't deliver. You better do it this time." So while you're seeing, I think, a lot of Republicans stepping up to the plate, you're also seeing Democrats getting serious.
And there's another issue too, Scott. I think you're seeing the public opinion on this issue has really shifted in the last couple of years. A new public opinion strategy poll this week shows 87% of Americans support some kind of path to citizenship. Republicans are hearing that message as well.
And so that's an interesting
and just
point.
Coming back to Debra's
as the conservative columnist for the Chronicle, what is at stake for Republicans in this debate?
Well, I think Republicans.
Well, you know what?
Go ahead, Scott.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. I can't. I think that just to Debra's point, Latinos really are tired, they say, of being used as a wedge. I mean, the fact that immigration reform didn't happen was sort of helpful to the Democrats in the 2012 election, but I think now they want something done. They're tired of being used and taken for granted, and the pressure is really going to be on the Democrats as well to get something done.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that that's an important point. I think Republicans, I mean, you've got, on the one hand, you've got people who feel that if people break the law, there should be more consequences. And that's, you've seen that in the base. That was sort of the Mitt Romney stand. But there's big business has an interest in having immigration reform. The party has an interest in reaching out to minority voters and to new immigrants. And, I think it's natural for the party. This is a lot of people come here. They come here to work and to be successful, and so Republicans should be reaching out to these folks. They're natural Republican voters.
So another big issue this week, of course, for the Republicans and the Democrats, gun control. President Obama introduced a whole slate of bills, very sweeping reform, what he has in mind. Carla, what impact is this debate having on California Democrats?
Well, in California, we already have some of the toughest gun laws in the nation, and we have had for more than a decade. But with this proposal, it presents a dilemma to some Democrats in California, particularly in swing districts. Scott mentioned Ami Bera, Jerry McNerney here in the Bay Area, who are in districts where they've had tough elections or re-elections, and they're going to have to face constituents again in the midterms. So this issue is a little bit of a delicate dilemma. They're going to be carefully watching, I think, to see what the proposals are. And for people in the Senate, not just in California, look, Harry Reid in Nevada, who is a NRA supporter, who has had the NRA support. This is going to be a very tough challenge for him to take on, and he's already sort of making noise that at this point, wait a minute, we're going to have to look at all these proposals. Some of them, like the checks, background checks, really have much more sort of universal support. Other things like the assault weapons ban, much tougher to get through.
Yeah, I mean, this is Harry Reid's biggest nightmare, having the Senate go first on an assault weapons ban. This is not something he wants to bring up. I don't think he's, my guess is that there are a number of moderate Democrats who come from states that are pro-gun states, and they I mean, we know that the last time that Washington passed an assault weapons ban, that hurt Democrats in the ballot the next time. And this is not a battle everyone in the Democratic leadership wants.
Let's bring this now to the local level, and I want to bring Scott back into this because I know that you've also talked to our local mayors, Oakland Mayor Jean Quan and San Francisco Mayor Ed Lee. They're in Washington. They're there for the U.S. Conference of Mayors. How much of this debate actually affects us at the local level? Cities like Oakland, where there were 4 homicides within 6 hours last Friday, where the crime rate for serious crimes has climbed 23% in the last year alone. Does it have that much of an impact at the local level?
Well, it does. And I mean, these mayors met in Washington, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and Joe Biden spoke to them this week. And yeah, I mean, they are desperate to have something done. And I think what I'm hearing from Nancy Pelosi and also Ed Lee and Jean Quan is that they want to see law enforcement officials, sheriffs, police chiefs, and police cops on the street. People who have more credibility, people who buy guns to protect the public, essentially, to be really front and center in this debate because they feel that those constituencies can be more effective in talking to Republicans. I mean, let's face it, Oakland, San Francisco, all the Bay Area delegation is going to be for gun control legislation, whether it's the assault ban or background checks or anything else. But I think some new voices need to come forward and really be mobilized behind the president in order to move some of these Republican votes and Democrats in tough districts.
So, Scott, serious issues aside, I mean, let's not forget there's an inauguration happening as well in Washington, taking place really amid much history. It's the 50th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech by Dr. Martin Luther King. It's also on also on Martin Luther King holiday. What's the mood there in Washington?
Well, I have to tell you, it's a little quiet. I walked by the White House earlier today, and they were still putting up the reviewing stands, and there were some folks there, some very excited. But talking to the cab driver on the way over here to the studio tonight, he was saying, "Yeah, it seems really quiet." I mean, people are definitely coming into town, and Congress members say that they've gotten rid of all the tickets, that they had more people asking for tickets than they could help. So, I mean, but there's no question that it is a little subdued compared to 4 years ago. Okay. Last time, of course, there was a new president, a new first family. It was a historic election. I think this time it's a little more subdued because there's a little more realism, and the level of hope and the expectations are a little lower, which may in fact be helpful to Barack Obama in his second term because the expectations the first time were just so sky high.
Well, we've had some reality checks, obviously. And just real quickly, Scott, did you bring your Gucci tux for the inauguration?
Well, forget about the inauguration. I'm going to there's a California fashion show tomorrow by the California Society. Yes. Oh, and let me tell you, some of the fashion A-listers who are going to be there, Mayor Chuck Reed from San Jose is going, Jean Quan.
And you're going to look so much better than all of them, my dear.
Scott, you look like you've already been there.
Nice plaid shirt, my man. Yeah. Thanks for giving us an inside look from Washington. Great to have you with us.
You bet.
All right.
Thank you.